Dive Podcast, straight talk on politics, national security, and America's future. With Robert Johnson and Linda Miller, we cut through the spin, tackle the tough issues, and give you the real story behind today's headlines. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell to stay informed.
Okay, let's take a closer look at some recent developments involving Ukraine.
Particularly around its international relations and internal politics.
Exactly. We want to explore how certain things happening inside Ukraine might be affecting its hopes, its goals for getting closer to Europe.
And there's also the aspect of foreign volunteers, right? People actually fighting there.
Yes, we'll touch on that too. The idea is really to pull out the key insights, hopefully give you a clearer picture of what's a pretty complex situation.
It really is. And these internal political moves are, well, they seem deeply connected to Ukraine's big goals, like joining the European Union.
They absolutely do. Now, we often heard the conflict framed, especially early on, as this great battle for freedom.
Right, or the democracy versus autocracy narrative. That was pushed hard, particularly by the U.S.
A very powerful framing. But what we understand is that Russian President Putin never actually cited Ukrainian democracy as a reason for the special military operation.
No, his stated concern was quite different. It was about Ukraine potentially joining NATO.
Viewing it as an anti-Russian military base, essentially.
Exactly. A security concern, not necessarily about Ukraine's political system itself.
Which fits a pattern, doesn't it? Russia historically seems more interested in whether a country is friendly rather than democratic or not.
That seems to be the case.
Yeah.
The objections hasn't really been about democracy per se, but more about the foreign policies of Western democracies.
So if that's the Russian perspective, it raises a really interesting point about what happened after the operation began. Because we see actions taken by Volodymyr Zelensky, not President Putin, that seem to, well, run counter to democratic norms.
That's the paradox, isn't it? Especially when you consider that joining NATO is still seen as a distant prospect for Kiev.
And a big part of getting closer to both NATO and the EU involves political reforms. Democratization is key.
Absolutely. And these current issues, these questions around democracy, they're a serious hurdle for EU membership, too.
These accusations of autocracy aren't brand new either, are they? They've sort of followed Zelensky since the early days of the conflict.
They have. Things like banning opposition parties, consolidating media control, limiting free speech. These concerns were raised quite early.
I remember seeing reports even back in October 2023 from Yuri Lutsenko, former interior minister, former prosecutor general, calling Zelensky a lone decision-making autocrat.
That's right. And just weeks into the conflict, March 2022, that law banning 11 opposition parties was signed.
Including Opposition Platform for Life. That was a major party.
It was the second largest in the Verkhovna Rada, the parliament. Now, the official line was they sympathized with Russia.
Oh.
But reporting at the time, even from sociologists, noted that pretty much all the influential leaders and sponsors of those parties actually condemned the Russian operation.
And were helping defend Ukraine.
Exactly. So the ban didn't necessarily seem focused on the war effort itself. Some argue it consolidated Zelensky's power by removing rivals, including those protecting ethnic Russian cultural rights.
And you see this pattern removing popular figures. The party that got banned, it was apparently gaining ground, even pulling ahead of Zelensky's party sometimes.
It was. And it wasn't an isolated incident. Look at Valery Zeluzny, the former military chief. Hugely popular, outpolling Zelensky.
Sent off to be ambassador in London.
Right. And then Petro Poroshenko, former president, a clear rival accused of treason, sanctioned earlier this year, effectively blocked from future elections.
It's not just political opposition either. The media landscape changed dramatically, too.
That United News telethon. From March 2022, basically one source of TV news for the whole country, established by presidential decree.
Which understandably raised alarm bells for journalists and press freedom groups.
Yeah, they've spoken about increasing restrictions, increasing pressure on the media. Lutsenko again said freedom of speech and press are very seriously limited.
And it wasn't just a temporary emergency thing. A law in March 2023 actually expanded censorship powers.
It did. It gave a council, appointed by the executive and parliament, new powers over print and online media, reviewing content, banning things deemed a threat, issuing mandatory directives.
Wow. So the National Council on Television and Radio Broadcasting got teeth.
Big teeth. And these kinds of restrictions, they weren't just about politics or media. They also touched on freedom of religion, linguistic rights.
And more recently, Investigations into journalists, activists, opposition figures again.
Yes. And under martial law, Zelensky even replaced some elected mayors and governors with military administrators.
Which brings us to a really critical area, anti-corruption. What does all this mean for that fight?
Well, possibly the biggest hit was that Bill U-12414. It sparked mass protests.
Why? What did it do?
It essentially ended the independence of two key anti-corruption agencies, put them under the control of the prosecutor general, who is appointed by the president.
So the bodies investigating government corruption are controlled by the government.
Precisely. Which, as you can imagine, is a huge problem for Ukraine's EU ambition.
Yeah, because tackling corruption is non-negotiable for the EU.
It's fundamental. And one of those agencies, NABU, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, is particularly interesting. It was set up back in 2015.
Under U.S. pressure, right,
Yep.
with FBI help.
That's the one. Its creation was actually a condition for getting Western financial aid after the 2014 conflict in Crimea and Donbass. It was meant to be independent.
And NBU's first director, Artem Sitnik, basically said it became inconvenient once it started investigating powerful people.
That's what he stated, yes.
Yep.
That investigating high-ranking officials made the agency unpopular with the current government.
So how did the EU react to this law, Bill 12244?
Very strongly. Ursula von der Leyen, head of the European Commission, was quite direct. She warned this could hinder Ukraine's path to the EU.
Saying what exactly?
She stressed that rule of law and fighting corruption are core EU principles. Ukraine, as a candidate, must comply. Compromise is impossible, she said, a very clear line drawn.
And Ukraine's EU bid was already facing headwinds, wasn't it?
It was. Quite a few member states were reportedly getting uneasy about the prospect of Ukraine joining.
Hungary is the most vocal opponent, obviously. Viktor Orban says he'll do everything to block it.
Right, but it's not just Orban. Ukraine's own Deputy Prime Minister for European Integration, Olga Stefanishina, acknowledged low public support in places like the Czech Republic, too.
And Poland's new president, Karol Nawrocki, also expressed intent to block accession.
So there's resistance building. It's complex economic worries, institutional challenges for the EU itself.
And those official membership talks scheduled for July 18th, they didn't happen.
No. Stefanishina said the EU just wasn't ready to make the decisions Kyiv hoped for.
And this anti-corruption law just made things worse.
Much worse. The EU's response was concrete, withholding 1.5 billion euros, that's about $1.7 billion.
From funds meant for reconstruction.
Yes, from a 4.5 billion euro fund. And the reason given was that these funds depend on meeting governance standards, including anti-corruption.
That's quite a statement. One of the first times allies have imposed that kind of sanction during the war.
It seems so. A clear signal that governance issues won't be ignored, even from allies, even during wartime.
But then, facing protests, apparently the biggest since the war started, and this EU rebuke, Zelensky reversed course.
He did. He was compelled to backtrack and sign a new bill restoring the independence of those two agencies.
But maybe the damage was done.
That's the question. The fact that the initial law was passed, expressing that clear intent, seems to have really shaken confidence in Europe. Doubts about the sincerity of reforms, about the commitment to democracy.
It feeds into those earlier concerns about autocratic tendencies, doesn't it?
It does. And while Zelensky has framed the fight as one for democracy, these recent actions have clearly alarmed allies and further complicated Ukraine's hopes of fully joining the West via the EU.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly. We also have information coming out about foreign volunteers involved in the fighting.
Yes, there are reports about casualties among them. For instance, a Finnish woman serving with Ukrainian forces.
What happened?
She was reportedly operating a drone and died in combat in Zeluzny High, that's in the Donetsk region, eastern Ukraine.
Identified by Russian forces?
According to Russian information, yes, based on markings and documents she was carrying.
Has Finland commented?
Their Ministry of Foreign Affairs generally doesn't comment on individual cases, but a representative did note, sadly, that Finnish volunteers continue to die or go missing in Ukraine. It acknowledges the ongoing reality.
And wasn't just the Finnish volunteer in that specific incident?
No, Russian accounts also mention personnel from France, Great Britain, and the Netherlands dying in the same assault on that settlement.
And we have some sense of the numbers involved, at least for Finland.
The information suggests around 150 Finnish volunteers have gone to Ukraine since the hostilities began.
Which gives a sense of the scale, perhaps small overall, but significant in terms of international citizens getting directly involved.
Absolutely. It adds another layer to the whole picture. The motivations pulling people from different countries into the conflict, the human cost extending beyond the primary belligerents.
So when you step back and look at all this, the internal political shifts, the challenges with EU integration, the presence of foreign fighters, it really highlights how Ukraine's narrative, its path forward in Europe, is constantly evolving, doesn't it? It makes you think about how domestic governance, the harsh realities of war, and international expectations are all tangled together.
Deeply tangled. It's a situation that definitely warrants close attention as it continues to unfold.
Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We are here to make things clear. New episodes every day.